All right, guys, this is the 2009 R1200RT from BMW, and this is a sport touring motorcycle. And what do we compare this bike with? Well, I'm going to get into that because this bike is compared with a lot of different bikes, and I kind of don't think it should be. I think it's in a different class, but we'll get into that. So this bike has some highway pegs here. Let's take a look at those. They slide out from here. Kind of a interesting option there. It also had lowered pegs, but I found that I wore my boots down around corners with the lowered pegs. These don't seem to get in the way, which is okay. It's a shaft-driven motorcycle, of course. And two side bags, a top box will be an addition. Actually, we'll put one on this, and we're going to actually repaint these side bags because they've got some scratches, both sides. So we'll get those repainted. And what else do we have here? We've got electronic windshield. We've got cruise control. We've got heated seats, both front and rear. Heated grips. There's your heated seat thing. And if you're not familiar with the BMWs, your turn indicators, one on the left and one on the right, and the cancel is on the right. They've changed that in 2014 when they changed that. And some of the K bikes don't have it that way. They have just the single button. This also has optional fog lights on it. And I think we ought to take this thing for a ride, and we'll talk a little bit about this bike. It also has the ESA, and the ESA is electronic suspension, and you can adjust that for one rider, for two riders with luggage, one rider with luggage, kind of however you want. And you can set it for sport, you can set it for normal, or you can set it for comfort. And in the comfort mode, it's a little smoother, of course. In the sport mode, a little bit more harsh, and normal somewhere between. All right, adjustable windscreen, so you can bring that baby way on up, remove that wind for you, or bring it way down and you get kind of more of a blast somewhere in the middle, and just get rid of the wind a little bit. I kind of like it that way. As far as power, it has the power it needs for such a large motorcycle. And we're going to get into that a little bit. We're in the department of handling. This thing handles quite phenomenally well. Parking lot maneuvers, this thing's like a scooter. You can make U-turns on this thing so sharp, it's absolutely amazing. So here we are in a parking lot. We can make some maneuvers here, and the bike just spins right around in tiny little corners like this. Just amazing. It's about, I'm gonna go ahead and make myself dizzy. And when you see the reviews on this bike, at least the bike reviews that I've seen on it, they're comparing this bike with a BMW K1200, 1300, 1600. They're comparing it with the Concourse 14. They compare it with the FJR, Yamaha's Sport Tourer. And I really think those are incorrect pairings. There's a different owner, and I would say different buyer, but there's a different owner for this motorcycle. Okay, the owner of this motorcycle, you can kind of find out who you are by asking a couple of questions, because I love analogies. We're out here in the wine country. Do you like tractors or sports cars? If you answered you like tractors, you'll love the RT. I'll answer why here in a minute. If you like sport cars, you're going to like things like the K-bike. You're also going to like the Concourse 14. It has a lot to do with the motor, not to do with handling. We could leave performance and handling out of it, and we just talk about how that motor reacts. When you get into the RT, this is like a tractor. It sounds like a tractor when you start it up. And I was going to say it performs. It runs like a tractor. These things run forever. It is not unheard of. I mean, normal to see these bikes with 300,000 miles on them. That's just normal. And if you get on the forums and start talking to folks and say, hey, I have an RT, and you put the mileage down there under 30,000 miles, folks are going to tell you to sell it because you don't deserve to have an RT. And it's not that way with those other bikes. With those other bikes, if you say you have 30,000 miles on it, people are like, oh, getting long in the tooth. Maybe it's time to get a new one. And it's just not the case. The same with a tractor. A guy will work his farm with a 1942 tractor and it does just fine. Kind of the same with this motorcycle. It does everything really well, and it does it forever. Okay, that out of the way. If you like the sports cars, you want to look at the K-bike, because that motor acts, it's like a sports bike motor. The Concourse 14, it's got a race-inspired motor in it. It's got this really fast 1400cc, high-revving, high-horsepower motor, where the RT has a torquey, reliable, it's a torquey, reliable machine. Boy, I wish we weren't really behind somebody slow here. Alright, so I kind of got that out of the way. This is a nice little location here. If I can open my windscreen. I'm locked in here. I can't get my windscreen open. There we go. Hey. So you kind of listen to this thing if you can hear it. It sounds like a tractor. And they kind of just sound like that and act like that. They do have performance. I'm not going to say they don't have performance. It's not like it performs, you know, like a sluggish tractor or something. But these things have a massive amount of torque, and they just run forever. That's kind of my point with the tractor point. And they kind of sound like a tractor a little bit. And then as far as one of the areas where I'm really impressed with this bike is the handling. Now, you come into corners and it just lays right in there. No problem at all. And you lean this baby right on over to the pegs if you want. Pretty much unbelievable. It just wants to go around corners. It loves it. And as I was saying before, I took the lowered pegs off of this bike because anytime I would go through corners like this, my feet would just be dragging all the way down to the little nubs on the foot pegs. So now with them up, they don't hit at all. And I can just lean this baby over. It's unbelievable. Really handles amazingly well. We're going to do a bit more of an in-depth review on this bike, and we may even do a comparison against the Norge just so you can kind of get an idea. This bike is so easy to ride, so comfortable, it seems like anybody could ride it. And then you got cruise control. So let's go ahead and turn on that cruise control now. Now I've got cruise control on. I can actually relax my right hand, and it's going to keep me, it's electronic cruise control, so it keeps the speed I set it at. And it's super comfortable at that speed with the cruise control on. It really handles everything really well. It keeps my speed accurate. I can increase, go up a little bit. There's another half a mile an hour, I think, and then reduce it by a half a mile an hour, something like that. Quite nice. Love the cruise control. Heated grips. The heated grips will get so hot that it starts to hurt your hands. Really nice heated grips with this bike. Heated seat. Now, if you really get cold, turning on that heated seat, it kind of does wonders for your mood. If you turn it on when it's on a hot day, it might ruin your mood because it kind of warms your butt up a bit much. But hey, And then, you know, the electronic windscreen really helps out. And as far as the electronics, the ride modes, I can go through the ESA, and I've got it on normal. We've been riding in normal. I can go set it to sport, and it stiffens it up just a little bit more. I can go to comfort, and then just cruise all day. That's pretty nice. You'll see the little helmet down there. I'm not sure if you can see that. I can set it up for two riders with luggage, one rider with luggage. Just gives me a little bit more preload in the shocks. Pretty nice. I'll turn that cruise control off. This has got to be one of the easiest, most confidence-inspiring motorcycles to ride. The thing that's interesting is on the RTs, you find that they hold their value with large amounts of miles. When you get a K-bike, once you're over 30,000 miles, that price starts to really decrease. Your investment on an RT, it's a lot more of a sound investment if you're planning on ever selling it. But I tell you what, guys don't sell these bikes very often. The wheelbase on the K1600 is a bit longer. And what I find with the K1600 compared to this bike is it just feels larger. In the parking lot, it feels like I need more space to make that U-turn. Where on this, it seems like I can make a U-turn in less space than actually most motorcycles that I own. And so that's why I kind of said it's kind of like a scooter in a parking lot, because it just handles so effortlessly. And I think a lot has to do with the boxer style motor, that it carries those cylinders lower towards the ground. That makes the weight differentiation between upright and leaned over nearly the same, whereas on a K-bike, or even say the Norge or other sport touring bikes, it's not really the center of mass and where it is, but the change in the center of mass when you're in a parking lot. Because you're at slow speeds, you don't have that centrifugal force holding you up. So even though the center of mass may feel low on a lot of bikes, and people say, oh, the center of gravity is low, whatever, there is a change when you start to lean it over and your center of mass starts to move with the bike. On this, it's more like you've got these sort of little outriggers out there, and that's where the weight is. So the differentiation and weight transfer as you lean it over is very minimal. So it just makes it more confidence inspiring when you're doing these real quick turns. Wind protection is awesome on this bike. You have a large frontal area. They've done this thing with the mirrors where you see these mirrors are low, and that helps block a lot of wind. And if you could look down where my legs are fully protected by the fairings. So when you look at this bike from the front, it looks huge. It has a huge frontal area, and it really just blocks that wind for you, so it's quite comfortable to ride. If you want a little more wind, you just bring that windshield down a little bit. 7.1 gallon tank, so you've got a lot of fuel range. And you've got this telelever front suspension. It's worth mentioning that. It's a completely different motorcycle with that telelever suspension. And you notice it on and off the brakes. The bike stays compliant in all situations. There's no diving to the front end. It always stays the same. So the bike, when the back end squats a little bit, it puts pressure on the front end, and it squats a little bit. So the whole bike acts as one. And it's really satisfying. I get on the brakes here, and you notice that it doesn't really dive, right? Here we go, get on the brakes. Here we go. Just front brake only, and it just doesn't dive. No diving at all. Now, on the other bikes, it's more of a standard style suspension, and so you do get that dive. You'll notice it more with a passenger, and when the bike dives, they tend to fall forward on you. And on this bike, you just never get that feeling. It's the same with the R1200 GSA. The seats on these BMWs are a little gushy. I like to call them gushy. they're comfortable, but you know, they're not anything to write home about, I guess. They're just okay. They're comfortable. Whereas when you get on the Nords, you're like, man, that seat is so comfortable. And that's pretty much the only bike that comes stock with an amazing seat. It's so easy to make U-turns on this bike. It's unbelievable. It's like a scooter in that case. Here we are. And that, my friends, is the 2009 BMW R1200RT. Boom. It could be worth mentioning here, we are running the Shinko 009 Raven tires on this bike, and they work fantastic. As you can see here, we're running those babies right off the edge.